Thank you so much and welcome to the First Friday entrepreneurship call. We call it the First Friday e-call with K-State Research and Extension. Victor Wang, who was the former VP for entrepreneurship at the Kauffman Foundation, defined entrepreneurial ecosystems this way. Humans are biological animals, so our society is a biological system. Biological systems, like natural rainforests, thrive because of the unplanned and uncontrolled results of countless interactions among flora and fauna. As a result, they adapt, they evolve. It's similar for human beings. Our society, our networks are a type of ecosystem too. They are rainforests, but made of people. Our world depends on the interactions of people who possess talent, capital, and ideas. This means everybody. So I'm just thrilled with all the new partners that we've gotten with this program. As I told our speakers, 130 people have joined this week wanting to know about and be a part of this trail call. And I think that speaks powerfully. I think some of you may not be interested over the long run, but many of you are the exact people that we were trying to reach. And so I'm just really grateful to Elizabeth and John and Wendy for being part of this. So I want to remind you that we do encourage partner sharing after the call. The call is scheduled for 60 minutes, but we will be here, as little as long as we need. The call is being recorded and you will get a link to the website when it's posted, and you'll get a copy of the PowerPoints from both Wendy, John, and Elizabeth. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it to Elizabeth Berger, the Senior Vice President of Programming for the Sunflower Foundation, and John Cohen, the Ottawa Area Chamber of Commerce, and Wendy Lee, the Ottawa Director of Community Development. And they're going to tell us about the role of trails in economic development. Thank you.
I'll start off. Thank you so much, Nancy. I'm Elizabeth Berger from the Sunflower Foundation, and I am talking to you today from my log cabin home outside of Lecompton. If you hear some snoring in the distance, it's the bulldogs. They just started up right before this call. I'm so happy to be here today on a warm early spring Friday talking trails. And speaking of talking trails, I'm going to get my slides up on screen. I have got a lot of slides today. And I think the important thing to remember is, like Nancy said, these are going to be recorded and archived. So I want you to think of this slide deck as a future resource for you to use, that you can return to, 3 months from now when you think, okay, what was that town she talked about with the artwork, or what was that report? So without further ado, let's get started. Trails and their potential as economic development engines. Who is the Sunflower Foundation, and why am I here today talking to you about trails? We are a statewide grant-making health philanthropy, try to say that 10 times fast, and our mission is to be a catalyst to improve the health and well-being of Kansans. We've been investing in trails as a public health strategy since 2015. We originally did it to get people to move more, be physically active, but quickly learned it was more than a public health strategy. It's a community development strategy. You can also see on the right side of your screen sort of a rundown of our history in trails. If you have any questions about any of these projects, we can certainly talk afterwards, or you can always follow up with me. We started, as I said, funding trails because we knew you couldn't just tell people to move more. People need a safe, accessible place to move. So obviously there are physical health benefits to getting outside and moving. We quickly learned, though, that there's so many more benefits. The research in the last 10 years has really been mounting on the positive effects of trails being outdoors on your mental health, improved cognition, brainstorming, reduction in anxiety and depression, and really interesting research that says, not even exercising, just being outdoors, how important that is for your mental health. Certainly, we have learned that trails are this very tangible symbol of community pride, quality of life, and the very act of a community coming together to develop the trail, that itself is very powerful. We like to think of trails as a great equalizer, mostly. Now, granted, there's some trails, the trail at Mount Everest, that aren't appropriate for everyone. But for the most part, when you think about it, this is a public asset that's really accessible to people from all backgrounds, all ages, all incomes, all abilities. So that's really something. And then finally, the reason we're here today, trails and their economic potential, bringing tourists and visitors and even new residents to your community. This is a photo of Legacy Square in Ottawa. We're going to be hearing from John and Wendy in a few minutes. I want you to look at those cyclists and the smiles on their faces. Each one of those represents either a happy resident in your town, a happy resident, a taxpayer, and a voter. So that's important. Or they represent a happy visitor to your town, someone who's there to enjoy the trail and then spend money. Now, there's a great paper from Headwater Economics. You can see it referenced down at the bottom of the slide. That's my go-to source for a lot of things to find out about trails and their benefits. And they have a nice piece that sort of outlines it here. Just a couple things to point out. With your residents, there's just these user benefits of the increase in property value, also safety benefits, lots of data over the last couple decades about how a trail actually makes an area safer. Then for thinking about visitors, your economic benefits and impacts of direct, indirect, and induced impacts. And finally, social benefits. That community engagement piece cannot be understated, because if you think about someone that's thinking about moving to your town, when they drive around, they're going to want to see happy people outdoors. It just feels good. Hard to quantify, but it feels good. We know from data that trails appeal to residents, and the National Association of Home Builders put out this study a few years ago and looked at the top 3 factors of home buyers across all age groups. So not just millennials, not just baby boomers, all age groups, what they looked for. And in the top 3 was access to walking and biking trails. Trails also appeal to the visitors that come to your area. The outdoor recreation economy in this country is huge. I was surprised reading this study that consumers actually spend much more on outdoor recreation than they do on pharmaceuticals. So now my husband, who's a pharmacist, might not be happy to hear this, but there you go. Now you might look at this and say, well, sure, that's great, but it's talking about Colorado and those mountain states. Well, who knows where this photo is taken from? Right here in Kansas at Little Jerusalem State Park. Stunning. I think maybe here in Kansas, we do still have that identity problem. We need to really look at our state, at the diverse and beautiful landscapes and ecosystems that it has. Now, this report just came out this week. The appeal to residents and visitors on trails and outdoor recreation, it has only amplified and accelerated due to COVID. I really recommend checking out this report. I'm not going to go through all these bullet points, except to point out the last one about how new participants have come into the fold, and they're really motivated for opportunities for outdoor recreation with low barriers to entry. So what we mean by that is you don't have to buy a lot of equipment, you don't need skills. To enjoy a trail, you really just need a decent pair of shoes, or if you're a barefoot runner, not even that. Here's just another page from that report that tells you some of the interesting information you could absorb. I was particularly intrigued by this idea of how we can really position trails as an antidote to all the screen time we're accumulating, and also the note about the importance of diversifying our user base. And think about that not only in terms of, okay, cyclists, walkers, whatever, but just the diversity of the world around us, wanting to make sure that a visitor would feel welcome coming to your town, even if they're from a different background, race, ethnicity. That this idea trails need to be open to everyone is really important. Okay, so we have the national trends that say the demand for trails is on the rise. So what's going on closer to home? Okay, here we all know about this trail, right? Katy Trail, you can't talk about trails without this. Over 400,000 visitors a year. It revived the dying towns. There's the 18-to-1 ROI for the state. This is a really interesting story. We had a speaker from Missouri State Parks come to a rail trail education event that Sunflower sponsored. And she talked about how 25 years ago, the success of this trail was not a sure thing. There were naysayers. There were, this is too expensive. And she said the role of the state was really important, of course, but the real success came when the towns along the way started buying into the vision. It really needs to be not only top down, but grassroots to make trails happen and be successful. So we knew about Katy Trail in Missouri. What about what's going on in Arkansas? This is becoming one of the fastest growing trail states in the country. I would invite you to Google and check out the Northwest Arkansas Razorback Greenway. That's a 36-mile trail, but it's actually 19 different trails that all connect in different ways, showing off towns. And then near Bentonville, it's becoming the mountain biking mecca of the world. Again, my go-to source, Headwater Economics. They did a nice study on looking at the benefits to residents, businesses, and so forth. You can check it out. They've got some templates you can use to measure use in your own town. But Arkansas, another close by state to look at what they're doing around trails, how they funded them, how they're marketing them, how they develop them, etc. Okay, what about this one? Just to our north, up in Nebraska, did you know that Lincoln, Nebraska actually has more trails per capita than Seattle or Portland? Yes. Now, I know we're talking about economic benefits today, but I would be remiss not to mention that study you see on your screen. This is from 2005, so some time ago, but this is notable because it was one of the first studies to really show the health impact of trails. And this is just when the conversation about the built environment was starting, and where, foundations like ours could get evidence to say, investing in trails is a good public health strategy. They looked at trail data. They looked at hospital utilization data. They did that magical stuff that statisticians used and found out that for every dollar spent on a trail, you had $2.70 in medical cost savings in your community. Okay, probably more pertinent to this conversation today is there is a trail that goes from Lincoln all the way to Marysville, Kansas, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And parts of it are called the Chief Standing Bear Trail. Wonderful signage. We'll talk about signage more in a minute. Okay, so how are we doing on trails here in Kansas? Well, we could be doing a little bit better as compared to our neighboring states. So I'm hoping today will sort of be a inspiration, aspiration, get our competitive juices flowing. This is from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, looking at state by state, the GDP in terms of outdoor recreation. So it does include more than trails, but it is a good measure to still use. You can see Kansas is sitting at 1.8. The average is 2.1. So we're not too far behind that national average, but look at those dark blue states. We can catch up to them. What really blew me away about this is you look at Rhode Island up there, 2.3. Now it's a beautiful state, but it's not much room to roam. So I think we're sitting on a gold mine here in Kansas that we can optimize. Okay, so how do we get there? You build a nice trail. You want the health and wealth it keeps promising. Let's solve this trail algebra. Well, the first mistake I think we make sometimes is we take the field of dreams approach. It's a lot of work and sometimes a lot of money to build a trail. We're tired. We just want people to come. And your diehards will, but for that other 90%, you really have to be focused, strategic, and intentional to get them to know your trail is there and to use it. Now, this photo is from the Prairie Spirit Ultra Marathon. It's been happening for years. It just happened last weekend on the Prairie Spirit Trail from Ottawa to Iola. I think it's a 100-mile race, guys, 100 or 50 miles, take your choice. So looking at those smiles, I'm pretty sure this was the first mile of the race. I do want to give a big shout out and thank you to Kansas Department of Wildlife and Parks. They work really hard over the weekend to make sure all the runners and families stay safe and healthy during the race. Trent McCowan, the trail manager, shared that. Here's your economic part, folks. 380 people came to this race. 1 was from Hawaii and 3 were from Alaska. 70% of all the registrants were from out of state. So that's money coming into your town for people to have the privilege of running for 24 hours without stopping. Okay, so we want to have a trail town. What is it going to take? It's going to take some research. And the good thing is we are not reinventing the wheel here. There's some great resources out there. That Trail Town Guide and the Gray Book from the Iowa Department of Transportation, easy to read, very pragmatic, very good. I do say they were written before 2010, so they're weak on the part about using social media, but lots of other good sage advice. You do need to have a realistic attitude. I listened to a webinar with the author of the Trail Town Guide. He actually runs a CDFI that's up in Pennsylvania. They specifically lend to towns that want to have local trail-oriented businesses. And here were some of his thoughts that you can kind of just review on your own. But I really like, there's no cash registers on the trail. You've got to make that link to the cash registers in your town. And finally, it takes looking at your community and what it can offer with fresh eyes. So quick story here about Bellecastle, France. I'm sure I'm mispronouncing it. Look at that charming village. Who wouldn't want to visit? Well, 100 years ago, it was falling apart, especially its chateau that was just in disarray and the whole town was kind of, Well, it took an architect to come in. He did all the political work to get it designated as a historical site, then all the architectural and construction work to make that medieval castle habitable. Then people started sprucing up their homes. It took a while, but now this little town of less than 200 people has thousands and thousands of visitors a year, art festivals, culture, etc. And it's, you know, been designated one of the prettiest villages in France. So I know those of us on the call today are always trying to look at our communities with fresh eyes, but just a reminder, and you know, maybe one day someone in France will be looking at a PowerPoint with a Kansas town on it. Okay, top 10 success factors in trail towns. This is from that Trail Town book. Not going to go through them all, just going to point out a couple. You can go back and read on your own. Number 5, engage artists to tell your story. The effect of art is hard to quantify, but still powerful. You know it, you feel it, you see it. The backdrop of this slide is from a mural from Iola and Allen County. They received a grant from the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission to commission some artwork about their trail. And there's the beautiful mural behind it. So art to help promote your trail and the town around it can be a very compelling factor. The other one too is thinking about the authentic ecotourist experience. If you keep up on some of the trends around travel, the majority of people, they want a unique and authentic experience. Your town and trail can create the landscape for that, and then they can bring their own paintbrush and create the experience for themselves. But authenticity goes a long way. Here's another list for you. That's from the Other Trail book. Again, just going to point out a couple of things here. One is that trail needs to be part of a larger visitor experience. Unless you're hiking the Pacific Crest Trail and all you want at the end is a hot shower, most people who come to your town to visit a trail, they want to fill in the gaps with other things. So they need to be there and they need to know they're there. And we'll talk about that in just a second. I put my notes here about the social media factor. This seems to be especially prevalent among people who love trails. So what I mean by that is a lot of times your information sharing is going to be, through Twitter and Facebook, Instagram. So think about that in two ways. One is, it's nice to have little features on your trail that are Insta worthy because people love to take selfies on your trail. The other thing is use this to your advantage. Great advice from the director of the board of Marshall County Connections. That's the conservancy that runs the Blue River Rail Trail, manages it. She said that they had contacted a travel blogger who did trails and, invited them to come get on the trail, gave them some vouchers for restaurants and lodging and entertainment. And the travel blogger came and used the trail, wrote about it, put it online. And that's the type of sort of social media, earned media that can be very powerful and authentic and speaks to others. Thinking here, again, my notes in red, when you're trail planning in a larger area, a trail that maybe goes across a couple counties, it does definitely require a lot more cooperation and coordination. It's going to take longer. Just realize that. The good thing is data tell us that certainly the longer your trail, the better the chance to get those out of town, out of state visitors, and the longer that they'll stay. Logos, that's a no-brainer. Is there anyone that doesn't know what Dirty Kanza is? And then recreation alone will not get people to stay overnight. Not everyone loves to camp. Think about a hard day's hike followed by your head on a soft pillow. This isn't just an opportunity for motels and inns. Great opportunity for Airbnbs and those entrepreneurs. Different types of trail users will want some different things in your town. There's some shared trends, but then there's also, an equestrian will need something different than a mountain biker. That can be a real advantage in getting more people in your town to spend money, what they'll need. It also takes, though, some planning ahead on your part. I want to give a shout out here to the new nonprofit Prairie Frontier Trails Association in Rooks County. You can see a photo of them there starting to plan out a trail. They are thinking about, a long-term plan with trails that will include hikers, mountain bikers, BMX, equestrians, even ATVs. So really thinking strategically about that. Word to the wise, you do also want to think ahead. If you're going to have a variety of trail users, there can be conflicts like, the horse meets the mountain biker. Not necessarily a problem. It just means thinking ahead and being intentional about it. This is such a great quote. I'm just going to read it. In the global economies, companies can locate just about anywhere, and many will make location based on quality of life. A community with ample opportunities for trail recreation can leverage this advantage for economic development. Very quickly before I throw it to John and Wendy, just gonna put a couple of other trail towns out there. If you want to connect to individuals in that town, contact me and I'd be happy to try to facilitate that introduction so you can have a really productive conversation. Certainly, Iowa and Allen County, they won a prestigious Robert Wood Johnson National Award a couple of years ago, and the hard work and resourcefulness of Thrive Allen County and what they've done for their expanding trail system was a big factor. I talked to their CEO a couple of weeks ago, and she said the trail is their #1 recruiting factor. It has helped them get a physician, a psychiatrist, a new city manager, and a dentist from Colorado. He moved here for the trails. It's also a top recruiting tool for their community college and their nationally ranked cross-country team. They've got the Portland Lehigh Trails. I'd invite you to go to the website and learn more about that story, where it was taking some sort of isolated tract of land that could have been a liability, partnership between Thrive, the city, and Iola Industries, Inc. to make this sort of a mecca of recreational activity. The Southwind Trail worked on that. Now connects to Humboldt in the south. And then you can go north, get on the Flint Hills trails, someday the Landon, 200 miles of trails, stepping out of your hotel in Iola. So great in the future, but great vision. I mentioned Humboldt. This is another story worth checking out. It is at the end of the Southwind Trail, so you can ride from Iola to Humboldt. But the very edgy and sometimes snarky Pitch magazine from Kansas City did a glowing review of Humboldt last November. You should check out, because a couple of very savvy entrepreneurs took some land right next to the trailhead and built a base camp where you can rent these tiny but very nice and comfortable cabins for the night and completely check out. You can spend the weekend biking, walking, kayaking. Great story. I mentioned the Blue River Trail. That's the one that starts in Kansas and connects all the way to Nebraska. It was one of the first trails, if not the first in Kansas, to have a covered bridge, which one of their directors said in the beginning, people thought, well, why go to all that trouble? That covered bridge has gotten them so many visitors. And now they've added the quilt blocks, and people will come out to the trail just to look at the quilt blocks. So always think about, what are these special things maybe you can optimize talents that exist in your community, but it makes just that little something special for your trail that makes it Insta-worthy. And Marysville and Marshall County, that's where the trail ends up. It's done great business for their restaurants. There's a new Airbnb by a local couple, the Trailhead Suites, right next to the trail. And that waterfall is from Alcove Springs, which is a few miles out of the city. Nice historical site, and thanks to Mike Goodwin and Kansas Trails Council, it's got some great trails. The point I want to make here is sometimes your trails don't always have to physically connect. They can connect conceptually. And you need to promote that as, hey, on Saturday you can do this, on Sunday you can do this, because you just want to entice your visitors to stay longer. Oh, I forgot to mention Hodgman County. They don't have a rail trail. That's okay. They've got trails out at their Horse Thief Reservoir. And because Jetmore is only 10 miles away and the only town around, they've really been able to capitalize on that for their grocery store, their restaurants, their laundromat. It's all about thinking, what are people that are going out there to do all this, including the trails, going to need from our town? Phenomenal signage at Indian Creek Trails in Johnson County. You wouldn't think that's a very exciting place to visit, right? Again, I would check this out on how Henry Fortunato, he has since passed away, but brilliant creative mind on how signage could make a sort of an ordinary trail extraordinary. I know Mike Goodwin's on this call, so if you want to connect to him, in Arcalan Park near Liberal, they are creating a network of destination trails. Look at that beautiful scenery. Who would not want to have that unspoiled splendor to hike and bike around in? And then, since Liberal's the only town around, guess where they're going to go to eat and stay and do all that. So sometimes a trail out in a more remote area, if you're in rural Kansas, that can be a good thing. It really can. Also, trails in the work at the Medicine Lodge Peace Treaty site. nice collaboration of honoring history and being able to be, you know, kind of like a fresh air museum in a way. You can look at these questions on your own. All I'm going to say with the backdrops are, this goes back to the how can we think outside the box. This is actually a shot of Republic County, and they are thinking about how to create a system of backroad biking. So not necessarily even trails, using that existing asset. Same thing is going on in near Wilson. So this is a photo of the Midland Hotel. How can we make all these roads we already have, make them enticing to cyclists and make our communities welcoming to them? So again, you can just look at all these points on your own and think through them. Let's start connecting. I've got my information on there. So email is best, but let's reach out to me if you want to talk more about trails. I am going to pass it now to John and Wendy, and they're going to tell you their story from Ottawa. And then if we have any time after that, I've got a couple more slides with resources. I know I've prattled on. So I'm going to throw it to John and Wendy now so they can share their screen.
That was fantastic, and I really appreciate the depth of information on it. Let's see. Here we go. Good job. Take it away.
Hey everybody, I'm John Cohen.
I'm Wendy Lee with the City of Ottawa, and we love always collaborating with Elizabeth. She's a great partner for us, and anytime we get a chance to promote Ottawa and the things that have done here and enable other Kansans or elsewhere, frankly, to capitalize on things that can be improving their physical health, their mental health, community development, quality of life, we're thrilled to do it. So thank you for asking us, and thank you for those who've joined to listen a little bit today.
And I'm with the Chamber of Commerce, and as Wendy said, we always enjoy telling people about, I think you can advance now. We always enjoy telling people about our community and the things that we're doing here, and hope maybe it'll pique your curiosity and that you'll even come and visit us. So
it's on timing. Okay.
So anyway, our history of Ottawa is that we were a railroad town once upon a time, and the railroad kind of dictated the community, who we were and how we were going to grow. And what it's left us with is a great resource. We kind of had to go through a transition where the rails left, and that wasn't available anymore. But when rail banking started, that became a huge advantage to us, because we were right at the intersection of two major railroads in Kansas, and they have developed into the Prairie Spirit Trail and the Flint Hills Trail. And so with those two trails on the former road beds, this is what we've developed since then. And Elizabeth had it just exactly right. As something like this, the development doesn't happen overnight, and it has to be very intentional. And Wendy, I'd say we've probably worked on this for 20 years to get to the point where we are now.
The Flint Hills Trail began in the mid-90s as an effort. As most trails, there was initial fear and concern
And pushback
and unwillingness to explore. And while we're showing you some of the images that are kind of our more rural, both trails cut through the middle of the community. And that's not true for all, but in our case, as John indicated with the rail lines, they cross through our downtown. Which means they go by a lot of residential areas. So not just the farmland and the concern from the rural folks, but the concern from right in town that, hey, this is going within 100 feet of my house. How is that going to affect me? But the Prairie Spirit Trail has been wildly successful, and we've really matured that as not, in fact, I think locally people probably don't even always fully understand and appreciate the value of the long trail. They use it daily inside the community for their recreation or transportation. And
that's what I was going to say. The Prairie Spirit Trail, which runs north and south through Ottawa, has really become a connector route for North and South Ottawa, just as much as it is a great trail to hike and bike on. And we already see from the development of that trail, people coming down from Lawrence that love to bike down here from Lawrence and get on that trail and go down to Iola and then back to Lawrence, which is probably more than I would bike in one day. We see people do it all the time. And I know they do it all the time because a lot of times they stop in my office and say hi when they're going through, because my office is downtown. So another thing that has been intentional is we've tried to build recreation by the trails. And so you can see our baseball diamonds, and the Flint Hills Trail is actually used by young people in the community to access the ball diamonds because it goes under the railroad track and under a major highway. And so parents can allow their kids to ride their bikes to bike practice because they don't have to cross the highway or the railroad. And then we've also in 2 locations against the trails, we've built golf disc courses, disc golf courses. And that's become a huge thing. And in fact, this summer we're having disc golf tournaments in both of these locations. It's going to be an all-day event. And so that's something we're looking forward to this summer.
The other is, I would say that people use the Prairie Spirit Trail to get to our swimming pool. Okay, and we as a community, so with the Prairie Spirit Trail really came early for us, but then we began probably 15 years ago to really concentrate on health improvements. And in that, we also became a play city. So our parks became very critically important to us to get people outside. And that has also followed well then with what we have done on the trails. And so to get to the pool again, our youth can get there without crossing a highway again. And that's been important for our local community. We also then capitalized on the fact that the city owned a piece of ground next to the Prairie Spirit Trail that really didn't have much opportunity for development, but it has been we developed our teen park there. So we added, you're kind of seeing the ribbon cutting there with the agility portions, which is to work on upper body strength and really challenging things, as well as our you would look at that ramp and think it's all skating, but it's biking, skating, anything with wheels. And there's basketball courts there.
Agility course.
The agility course, the paint, the graffiti wall has been very popular as well. But it's just a place for those teenagers, and we mean even young teenagers, but we have people in their 20s too, to just hang and feel like that's their space. And they can get there on the trail. So again, de-emphasizing that you have to travel by car everywhere, and whether you're walking or biking.
And another thing we're working on and still haven't completed, but would like to soon, is an agility course for older Americans,
Right.
Meaning me. This is a very rambunctious park, and but we're finding that as our communities and our generation ages, we're looking for agility parks for people that are moving towards retirement.
And people who are already there and are recovering, but ways to encourage their balance. That's become really important. And in our community, as well as lots of places around Kansas, serving seniors is critical. And COVID has also re-emphasized this in that you may meet different people at these places than you would normally come into contact with. It enables you, again, for mental health and wellness, to make social connections other than just who you live near. We also, there's the agility course lower left. We also have invested in really, in a lot of teen amenities, the pump track and the skate amenities, but the upper left and upper right are things that examples of how we enhanced our trails and parks with what we call just little amenities that spark a little creativity. We created things out of tires along the trail to encourage kids to want to go from one place to another. So if the parent wants to do the linear trail, but the kids are, I don't want to do it, I'm ready to go home. This kind of encourages them to make the next destination with something to play, as well as the hopscotch, which we actually have all throughout town. That was something we created out of our relationship of encouraging people to just have fun, just
And
for a
we see
mental health
all
break.
ages just walking down the sidewalk, stop and do that hopscotch when they come to it.
I've actually seen more adults than kids.
Yeah.
And the smile, and even just at the hospital, the opportunity to improve someone's day through like 10 painted squares is just amazing.
Yeah.
And so all kinds of ways, again, to get people outside and do things. And sometimes people think of trail development as, oh my gosh, that's X, $100,000 a mile. I don't know how we do that. We use the state's investment in the Prairie Spirit Trail as a backbone, and then developed things off of it that were networking. And so these other play pods were some of that, as well as the other amenities that you need to have in your community.
And we've installed bike racks. We intentionally went to all the municipality and county government locations and installed bike racks. And we've encouraged many of our downtown businesses to do the same. And Wendy, we're just about ready to install
Another dozen, I
another
think.
dozen. So, you know, if you're going to be a bike-friendly community, then you have to have bike racks. Just like if you advertise that you're a family-friendly church, you have to have changing stations in the men's restroom. And it's the same kind of concept. If you're going to say it, then you have to do things such as this to allow people to have places to lock up their bikes and then take advantage of what you have in your community.
And there are resources like this lower right that is an affordable way to put in a rack for just a few, as well as letting people be creative. With the city sites, we actually let all of the city different departments and places create their own. And that is actually our utility warehouse that created the one with the hydrant. But we have lots of fun things like that.
And we have a downtown businessman who's also a welder, and he's quite an entrepreneur, and he's developed a bike rack that can sit right in front of businesses and not protrude onto the sidewalk. And so now we have businesses coming to him because they want one of these bike racks too.
As well as the ones we put in the corners. But again, those subtle things are ways to remind residents to not let a barrier keep them from getting out and doing a ride. Anything that you can do to encourage, facilitate, and remove barriers is critical.
This is a trail system that goes all through Franklin County that we have these maps that we give out to people when they come in. It connects all the communities in Franklin County, and it shows the major trails that they're in green, the Flint Hills and Prairie Spirit, but all the other colors are trails and bike paths that you can get to every community in the county.
And it identifies the roads where we think you have the most safe opportunity if you are comfortable with road travel, and then the ones that are going to be in red, the more experienced riders, meaning that you may be going to face higher speeds of the vehicular traffic, maybe some challenging hills, etc. But when we did our active transportation plan, we did one in the city first, and then we received some funding through Pathways and others to do funding to do an active transportation plan for our county. All of those policy documents are also important, and Elizabeth is a great encourager of those kinds of things as well. The city has been fortunate to work with the Sunflower on several of our trail interior things, as well as circular trails in certain neighborhoods. Once you get people out, then you get them experienced, then they're willing to take these longer routes.
These roads have been signed, and we have travelers stop in our office all the time asking for the map, the bike trail map, and so we have those available.
And we're getting ready to do our signage on the trails, which will include things like getting off the trails, such as this, to explore our county. The next one's just such great fun.
Yeah.
John and I were both privileged to be a part of a group that led a tremendous new opportunity for Ottawa. And we call that our Legacy Square project. But it was formed by the committee called Onward Ottawa. And that's because we don't want to stop with Legacy Square. This is what it looked like. And I know Elizabeth shared some other places, examples of what something is now.
This was where those people were standing with the bikes.
Yes.
In Elizabeth's.
This is looking southeast at the intersection of the two trails. And when we realized the Kansas Trail, we were not utilizing that well. And it was just as the state was contemplating acquiring or building that relationship, we went, we've got to do something about this. We were visioning our community into the future, and the biggest resonance with our community was they wanted to captivate the opportunities from the two trails. And so this became our focus corner. And this became our vision. And it is this, because we had anticipated it in 3 phases. This is a community who hasn't always been charitable, philanthropic community. And this is the first serious community effort to do that. And I've been here for years and years. John's born and raised here. And we couldn't be more pleased with the outcome.
We were lucky. We had one major donor donate over $2 million to the project, and then we were able to raise another $2 million to match that. And so then with some grants from the state, and we've been able to create this, and this was just a rendering, but this is exactly what we built, and it's open today. And we already have had events. We kind of got hurt during COVID, but I will say that during COVID, we were able to hold some events there, such as all our political candidate forums last fall during the campaign were held there. And we had movie nights on the green space during COVID, where we'd have at least 100 each time. And we put up a big screen and show movies there last summer. When we cut the ribbon on it, we had a free concert, and estimated we had maybe 500 to 1,000 people there. It was a come and go thing, so we had a lot of people during that time. And there's also events that are planned there for this summer now.
And so it became a focal point for the community. We have other venues, but this opportunity near the trails was critical. The state funding really went for this lower left here is a restroom facility, men's and women's restroom, as well as a shower facility, because we felt like this was something that needed to be available. And we were glad to partner with the state on that, as well as some local partners to facilitate that. I think our next goal downtown is going to be some housing, camping opportunities. And it was exciting to hear some of Elizabeth's comments about that as well. This is really what it looks like. We use this under canopy, obviously for shaded parking, but also have had some events where the food trucks have been alongside, and we've had our farmers market occasionally down here. We have a permanent, there's a more permanent location in the community as well, but we've brought this downtown, and the response to having it downtown too has been thrilling.
And this in May, we've got what we call our flea junk and trunk, and it's going to be under this pavilion. And we had just opened it up here a couple of weeks ago, and we already have near 70 vendors that have indicated they're coming to the community for Saturday. And I don't know what the numbers are on people that have liked it and said they're going to attend, but it's huge. But here is the thing that I think is really relevant to our conversation today, and that's the development that's happened in our downtown since we've built Legacy Square. I was just kind of made a note here. So we've had a bike shop open up, and this is in the lower left. Jeff Carroll's on the far left, and he's opened up Ottawa Bike and Trail. It's been open now for a year and a half. We had a brewery open up on Main Street, and that's hugely popular for bikers to stop at that brewery. We've had 2 coffee shops open up. We've had 2 new events spaces open up. The top left is inside one of those spaces. We've had 4 new restaurants open up in the downtown, restaurants or cafes. We've had 1 hotel open up on the trail. We've had 2 Airbnbs that I know of, and I think Wendy was indicating there's even some more.
Yeah, our data I just was presented with yesterday is we have 14 short-term rentals available, and so VRBO, Airbnb, what have you. And then we have a new bed and breakfast that's not on the trail, but they have a very good relationship with Ottawa Bike and Trail. Even I made a note to myself, last year, after the bed and breakfast had opened up, I think just before COVID, some folks came to ride the trail, and it rained the entire weekend. I mean, not a little rain, downpour rain, but the folks that shared said we had such a good time, and we went and at least explored the trail enough to know we are absolutely coming back. And I felt like, wow, what a success story. Terrible weather weekend, and we still sold them that Ottawa's a place to visit.
We had a former manufacturing building on Main Street that had been abandoned, completely remodeled and turned into a cafe, business offices, an art gallery, and the upstairs into apartments. And this summer, we're having an ice cream shop open up in downtown Ottawa. And this is the stuff that's happened since we've built Legacy Square, and have tried to be more intentional about it. This is just some of the locations. On the far right is the brewery. The left picture is a popcorn and candy store. And she's the one that's expanding, and she's torn out the wall of that building, and she's opening up an ice cream shop to expand. The top right is a shooting experience, an indoor shooting range. It's called the Gun Guys. It has been in the community for a while, but it's another thing that people that ride the trails like to stop and take advantage of.
And there's the bed and breakfast on the upper left. And then in conjunction really with some of this, one of our stalwart bicyclist enthusiasts purchased Old City Hall. This has taken a bit longer. He and I just chatted again just recently, but they have both long-term rentals there as well as the Airbnb in this building. And it's a fabulous construction project. They still have the old vault in there with the door even. And so it's adjacent to the trail, the Pershbrook Trail, but it's only 3 blocks from the Flint Hills and the intersection with Legacy Square. So we really wanted to go back and at least touch on, we got some great support through grants. We had our active transportation. We did a Connecting Ottawa, I didn't mention that, but from north to south, discussed some alternatives with that project. And then we did the county active transportation. The state is now talking about developing a statewide active transportation plan. And I think the good part about that is it'll help other localities do that. We've done some bike rack where as we started, John said, with institutions and locations, but now we're adding all of the other areas and encouraging people to do it. We had already gotten a road diet site, but we've also added bike lanes to other locations as well. And the combination has just been great for our quality of life and for our mental health, I think. So I'm going to skip through. Oh, we did have the pathways. We also added a playground. We didn't really talk about that.
Yeah, we added a playground during the process of building Legacy Square. Somebody across the street donated land for a playground, and we've had donations for that. And a couple of our more recent successes are both our trails were recently named as national transportation. National recreation trails.
Yeah.
And then also the state just announced that they're going to build a bridge over the railroad west of town, which is another huge addition because we actually had to leave the trail and go onto rock roads for about 3 miles and then come back to the trail. But now with this grant, we're building a bridge over the railroad, which will even make the trail even more desirable for bikers to come, and they can bike clear from Osawatomie to Council Grove, and all of those communities are involved in creating experiences in their community just as we are.
And I would probably just say one other thing. We as a community also then have developed an industrial park and invested in that, and the state has widened a bridge there so that we can use it as an alternative transportation method as well. But whenever we have promoted our new industrial park area, we've also talked about our trails because we do believe that, and COVID has probably only enhanced that in some ways. People are working from home and they do have choices about what they do, but when they do go to work and they're and with the new development of job opportunities, having that as a method of improving your quality of life is a way to attract both companies and employees.
And the trail system is consciously connected to the new business park, which is a mile south of town, and the future plans include trail system in the inside the development. So it's something that you can't build it in a day, but if you don't plan for it, then it just doesn't happen.
And as I would probably conclude, I encourage communities of all sizes, if you can do a block of sidewalk trail or sidewalk and then a even painted path, do something. It doesn't have to be grand and huge at the start, but people capture that vision. And the more people saw people using the Prairie Spirit, the more people saw them using the Sunflower Trail on the west side of town, the more they were motivated to get out and the more they supported it. So now when we ask a project that's, I don't care what they're proposing, whether it's downtown or elsewhere, to add the bike racks or to figure out ways to connect, or we're working on TIF or CID incentives and require that, the more they are willing to do it because they see that that connectivity is critical. And it's good for their bottom line, that people want to go places by other than vehicular traffic, even to just do business. With our Walgreens, I see people walk all the time there. And so it's very, very critical to just pick up and do something, just something and start.
John and Wendy, I can tell how excited you are about this. And I want to assure all of you, I think there's probably a lot of questions and comments out there. We're not going to cut it off. I know we're approaching 10:30, but if you're willing to stay, then we're willing to stay too. I want to start a little bit with some of the comments that I hope you're watching the chat. Someone asked about data and links to report, and Elizabeth has given you lots of those links. And I think Elizabeth has made some really good insights in here about restrooms and access to restrooms. And she makes an important point about, you know, if your trails go by your businesses, then what's wrong with saying, welcome, we have a clean restroom. It brings them into your town. It brings them into your place to look around. They might see something that they want, make them feel welcome, and so forth. We are getting a lot of interest, John and Wendy, in the bike racks that you talked about, that the entrepreneur set up in front of his.
I'd be happy to send some pictures. Could I send those to you, Nancy?
Yes, please. And I will send them out, and his contact information if he's willing to make them for others.
I'll check with him and ask if he's willing to do that. But they're real neat bike racks.
Yeah, they're fairly simple, and you know, we visited with them several times and with the maker of the racks about the location. Because, and you know, as a city official, I always feel like it's important that you make sure and have contact. Some cities won't be, may not be as open about it at first, but if you're conscious of making sure that you're still providing accessibility, you're keeping a clear way, not just the rack, the bike on the rack, a clear way for those that may have disabilities. You can usually work it out, but you have to be thoughtful of all users of the sidewalk and right-of-way area.
That's wonderful. Okay, so I'm going to open it up. Who wants to ask verbal questions or in the chat? We'll be watching those chats. Pushback was mentioned early on. When establishing trails, what about landowner and adjacent resident concerns such as trash, trespassing, gates left open, and so forth? Advice?
Well, so I'm also on a bike advisory group, and I would say one of the things is don't poo-poo it. I mean, it's a valid concern. The evidence hasn't really shown it to be a true reality, but it's a very valid concern. For most part, the folks along the trails have become, once they have an opportunity to experience it, they and maybe go to another community where they have it, they find that actually most users intend to pack it back out with them, that the trash that they may be experiencing is really more along roadsides than it is along bike trails, and that they're very conscious about gates, but that usually, and in our case, we have people they can call if they're having some kind of a problem, and again, for us, having the Prairie Spirit First helped, but there were still and are still a few places along the Konza Trail that a few owners are still a little bit wary and can be concerning. But I think over time that can be augmented by just experience. But maybe going to another trail or having someone that's from one of our trails, even Kansas Wildlife and Parks, talk about the ways that they've built relationships with those neighboring owners, about how to be available to them, to take the calls, to address the concerns. Every so often, you know, of course, we had in our county, a lot of our younger population was using motorized vehicles on the trails when they shouldn't have been. They would have been on the roads, right? But figuring out how to, if they're hearing that and it's a problem, using that noise as a way to then make a 911 report so it could be dealt with. And that showed that we weren't saying, hey, just it's a free for all.
I just had two things. First, make a partnership with landowners and not a confrontational environment. And second, I think that landowners learned that people that use the trails for biking and hiking that are long distance travelers are good neighbors. And I think that was learned early on, and certainly not the complaints. Certainly we didn't see the problems that everybody envisioned.
Right. In fact, I think a lot of this, even on my board, we had some people that were very clear up front, they didn't like it, and they've been won over by the experiences and by the responsiveness of people who are supporters.
A question we have is, do you have somebody who was once opposed or afraid who might be willing to give testimony or an
I think-
observation for others?
I think so, off of the Flint Hills Trail Advisory Group. There's a couple of people I'd have to reach out to see if they'd be willing to talk about what's persuaded them and had them become advocates and how they then work with other neighbors. We have a few names, and not so much in Franklin County, although if I thought hard about it, I probably
think I
could.
come up with a name or two.
So yeah,
I think too that, our rural neighbors are community partners too. And as they saw the success we started to have with the trails, they understood the economic benefit. So
Yeah.
there's that too.
Yeah.
we've had some people add some businesses in the rural part, trail,
Yeah.
some
yes.
horse riding opportunities.
Yeah, over at Rantoul, Kansas, which is right on the
Little
trail,
town.
they've actually added, which that trail is equine friendly. They've actually built a stable there where people can stable horses, and that's been something that's been great for that community.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Nancy, I'll
Yeah.
jump in and also say, these are such good questions. The Sunflower Foundation had the opportunity to do a legislative report for the House Agricultural Committee 2019, and we convened several conversations with a variety of trail stakeholders, including landowners. And there's some very instructive information that came out of that, much of it echoing what John and Wendy have just said. Also picked up on the importance of partnering with your local law enforcement. The landowners, they just want to make sure that trail is going to be safe.
Right.
It's public, and it's a public document. So if you are interested in reading that report, just reach out to me, Elizabeth, directly, and I'd be happy to send it to you.
So there's a question we haven't asked yet. Is there a plan for a statewide trail?
Oh, we probably should have been clearer. Our two trails here are state trails. The Prairie Spirit Trail was begun as a state trail. Now inside the city limits, it is really the cities, and we maintain and we develop, and we've added amenities, lighting, benches. We're responsible for the asphalt surface. We'd like to improve the Konza Trail in the community to not just a rock surface, but our two trails are state trails. And the state is working to show those mapping of whether it's a private, nonprofit trail or public, so that it becomes more seamless and it really doesn't matter who owns it. But ours are. Those are the only two I know of in Elizabeth, but I think there's a few others. I don't know the names.
That are linear state parks. Prairie Spirit and Flint Hills, I believe, are the only two at the moment.
Okay.
Actually, my question was, is there a plan to connect trails in Kansas so you have beyond just one county or several, that there is, does anybody know of a bigger vision that connects the whole state? As
Well, Jane, that's a great question. And I think it goes back to what I had mentioned about the Katy Trail and how the speaker on it talked about the importance of the bottom up approach. So even if the state came out with this, and there are maps that show possibilities that if rail trails corridors were developed, they could connect this in that way. And I think these visions are important to have, but it really comes down, in my experience and the research I've done, to each and every community has to buy in to having that trail in their community, and then the vision to connect to other trails, because they know that it will increase visitors to their community if you have that connectivity. So I guess what I'm trying to say is this idea of a statewide trail, the vision sort of the potential is with all of us and our communities, because as we build trails and connect them to others, it sort of organically happens. And that, if you look at the research from the Rail Trail Conservancy or American Trails, that's really kind of how it happens. I know that's not a clear-cut answer, but it's fairly organic in a way and very, very grassroots.
I think that's a great answer and legit, makes good sense. Okay, so there is a question about distributing the testimony of those skeptical landowners. Elizabeth, what I hear you saying is any questions that trail people have, you are happy to have them email you when they have those questions. Do you have other ways to distribute information or a resource bank that they can look at?
Well, thank you, because this is, if I may share my screen again, I wanted to pull up a few more things that people might find helpful from the Sunflower Connection. So the legislative report, and it's not really much testimony per se, it's sort of the thoughts and perceptions of landowners, but again, there's recommendations that I think will be helpful. That is on KS Ledge's website, but frankly, it's probably easier for you to email it to me, and I'm happy to send it out. We do have some resources on our website. The reason I ask for people to contact me is, and it may take a while for me to get back to everyone, but once we start that connection relationship, then as Sunflower we do a lot of convenings and conferences around topics of interest to people around trails. And we'd like to be able to have you on the contact list to reach out. I'm going to do a shameless plug here, if that's okay, because I did want to leave you all today with some to get you started. The Get Outdoors Kansas, this is a online coalition. This is a website, and this is a really sweet app. It's free, no ads. This is a partnership between Sunflower, Kansas Trails Council, and the Evergy Green Team. This is a way each and every one of you on this call today, if you've got a trail and you want to make sure that it's being promoted, go to Get Outdoors Kansas. We're always wanting people to upload photos and descriptive natures of their trails. If you're looking for trails, there is a phenomenal trail finder feature that will help you filter. So this is a free tool designed for you to use to promote your trails. I would be remiss to not also say, and I know many on the calls have already used this, the Trail in a Box. This is a library of trail tools. It comes with technical assistance. Mike Goodwin, you see him there. He is a change maker and a thought leader when it comes to trails, and can help you think conceptually and in very tactical terms what to do. Natural surface trails aren't for everyone, but we like to call them the gateway drug because they're not typically very expensive. It's just a lot of sweat equity. And it's a way, if your community has no other resources for a trail right now, this is a good way to get started. And then just for people in the chat box, the last two slides of this are just all the references. So I'm done sharing my screens. Thank you, Nancy, for letting me do that.
Absolutely. And I think
Elizabeth.
Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Well, I was just going to chime in after that introduction, Elizabeth. If anyone would like to engage with the Kansas Trails Council for trail advice or assistance in any way, you can use the email address info@kansastrailscouncil.org or info@getoutdoorskansas.org, and those come to me. And so we'd be happy to respond to anything and help people build more trails across the state when we can.
I agree with the comments online. This is just a wealth of information, including direct access to people who have thought about this for a long time. Boy, I don't want to cut off anything, but I'm aware of what time it is. And This will go online. I'm gonna stop this. This will go online, but I wanted to open up for a little bit of sharing. Selfishly, while I've got all of you people who are thinking about grants, I want you to think about joining K-State Research and Extension's grant writing workshops. I'm going to put in the chat box the opportunity to participate in one of two that are right now being planned. The one that I will highlight to you first is the one in Chisholm Trail. There are two that are being planned. The other one, okay, are you seeing the grant writing workshops slide?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, so we have two that are planned. The other one is nearing capacity. So I'm going to focus on this one at the end of April, and we'll be adding others. We'll be putting them on our calendar. But our workshops are online, so you don't have to be in Yates Center. Last November, we had somebody from Garden City want to come to the Yates Center in-person workshop. And she said, do you know where Yates Center is? Now it doesn't matter. You don't even have to be in Kansas. It's an online workshop. We're working hard to create the kind of opportunities that happen in the workshops where we can learn not only from me, the facilitator, but to learn from others. And I've been talking about the Sunflower Foundation ever since we started doing this, and the Trail in the Box, because I tell people it's not just about money, it's about the access to the knowledge and the other resources like Trail in a Box, so that you can create a trail possibly without the money. The enrollment is somewhat limited, although this workshop has plenty of capacity. The cost is $60. There are 2 days of 3 hours of in-person or synchronous online training. But otherwise, there's just a ton of resources, including long lists, many pages of, here are some grants for you to consider. Here are some sources of data. And Elizabeth, I'll certainly be adding these sources of data to the list for people who are looking to write grants for outdoor trails. Thank you for that. And I'll stop my share. Who else has something that you want to share about and tell our audience about? Well, if you're still here, I would love it if you would give us some feedback about the call and see if it was helpful to you. One more ask to see if there's anybody that wants to share anything. And I always like to leave you with a thought for the day. Elizabeth and John and Wendy, this was exciting. I just know it's going to get a lot of views on our archive, and if you're registered, you'll get a copy of that notice as soon as it's updated. So thank you so much for your preparation and your time today. And so I'll leave you with this thought for today by the very quotable Seth Godin: go make something happen. And thank you all for what you do to make it a great day in Kansas.